Mitchell has his head up, takes the feet. Oh, my! Donovan!
Get that weak stuff out of here!
Welcome back to the Junkyard Pod. On today's episode, we will be going over some hot takes for the Cleveland Cavaliers. I asked you on Twitter and YouTube to send over your best or worst hot takes, and we got a bunch of takes.
Like, I don't know if we got any good ones. We got a lot of hot ones. We got like one good one, but nobody said anything about Sam Merrill, so that's a red flag. No one said Max Strus is going to be on the All-Star team. You know,
Of all the times for Cavs Twitter to be reasonable, now was not the time. So
right. So, well, no, we got some pretty unreasonable ones here. Maybe the fact that you think that they were reasonable is kind of concerning. But that's something to talk about.
Before we get into today's episode, I want to quickly say, if you are not subscribed to the Junkyard Pod on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, then please go do so. And if you want more Cavs content, you can follow me and Jackson on Twitter. The links will be in the description, and you can find all of
X.
Technically,
X,
but I will still be referring to it as Twitter. All of our Twitter links will be in the description, and you can find all of our work for Write Down Euclid and Fear the Sword. Also, this will probably only be part one of our hot takes heading into the season, so stick around for more unhinged opinions in the near future. Let's start with the one that I think you will find the most unreasonable, potentially. And I'm just going to summarize all of them because there was a bunch surrounding this topic, and I'll just put it like this. Darius Garland is the Cavaliers' best player. Jackson, what are your thoughts?
I just don't agree. I just don't know how you can get there with Donovan Mitchell on the team. And I kind of know how you get there. I think it's just because the Cavs didn't draft Donovan Mitchell. The Cavs drafted Darius Garland. So we have been able to see his development, and it's been a lot of fun. And I love watching Darius Garland as a player. I think he may be more fun to watch. Like, the best version of Darius Garland is maybe the most entertaining player in the league. So I think that's how you get there. But just overall, some of the limitations he has, I think just kind of put a cap on who he can be unless he drastically changes some of those, some of his playing style, playing off the ball more, shooting threes more off the dribble, extending his range. Unless he does those things, I think some of those limitations are going to keep him kind of around the player he currently is.
He has more limitations than Donovan Mitchell, for sure. I also don't agree that Garland is their best player. I think he has a leap in him still, potentially. I also think the Cavs offense looks the best when Garland is wheeling and dealing, when he's kind of the one making the decisions and getting everyone involved. But that doesn't necessarily mean you're the best player. I think he's by far their best playmaker. He's obviously an elite three-point shooter. As you said, he needs a little more volume there. I'd like to see him do more of it. I think he has showed signs as a competent defender. Of course, he will always be limited by his size and not really having as much athleticism as some of the other elite guards. But his ceiling is still very high at only 23 years old. With that said, though, he's still at least a tier below Mitchell, if not more, as a shot creator especially. I think the way that Mitchell is able to get into the paint and kind of tank through defenders, or even just create separation over multiple defenders, is the reason why he is the one who naturally closes the games. That's why the ball tends to go to Mitchell at the end of games, because he is just better at creating a shot for himself. The one limitation that I want to point out with Garland, and something that I think would help him a lot, is if he's able to get to the free throw line more often. Of 34 guards last season to average 20 plus points, Garland ranked 21st in free throw attempts. So 21st out of 34 guards. Those are easy points that if he's able to get to the line, he's a great shooter, obviously. That could really help him make a leap, but I still think he is at least one step below Mitchell, for sure.
Yeah, I think so. Some of the issues with Garland come down to his size, and I know that he's always, every summer we talk about, hey, he's putting on weight, he's developing physically, he's going to be a lot stronger, but I feel like there's only so much he can put on that frame that he has. It's just, he's always going to have those problems of and you see it more in bigger matchups where there's against better teams who usually have more length. We saw it in the playoffs. The Knicks are a team that has a decent amount of length on the perimeter. Like, they were able to have their way with him, and I'm not sure entirely how he's going to, break through in those moments that you kind of need him most. And I think, as a scorer, he really needs to become more of a 3-level scorer. He hasn't finished well at the rim in his entire career. Last season he was a 57%. He only converted 57% of his looks at the rim, which is in the 35th percentile for guards, which is not good. He, until that little floater game, it always looks better than it actually is. Until he develops into a 3-level scorer that can score in that first and second level, as well as getting, to the free throw line, he's really going to be limited in who he can be. And I think his best games are always going to show up against teams that don't have the length to really bother him. And the teams that don't have the length to bother him just usually aren't good teams. So it just kind of limits his ceiling and effectiveness in like a playoff setting. So not to say like these criticisms are, I think, very like
nitpicky.
Right. I mean, they're criticisms, but it's like, yeah, he's still like a very, very good player. I think he's an all-star level player, but it's just like the gap between an all-star level player and a all NBA level player is really wide. So unless he fixes those things, and then also he needs to do a better job of fitting with Mitchell. I think he's effective off ball, but he's not good off ball. And I think the same thing can be said for Mitchell too. So this is a criticism for them both. Like, if you're going to run lineups with Allen and Mobley, you need to do a better job of using the two guys that actually have a lot of gravity, having them work off ball in a way that's natural and free flowing. Like, we see them when they run sets, they can get those guys open and they can do things. It's just, late in the shot clock, they're just kind of standing around and they're not really trying to move off ball. They don't have like a free flowing offense. And that really hurts. I think that hurts the guards most.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said right there. I think you put it perfectly. I'm going to go ahead and jump ahead to a different take here, just kind of on the topic that you were mentioning in terms of their offense and that free flowing movement. We have a hot take here that the Cavs will lead the NBA in 3-point attempts and or 3-point percentage. For context, they ranked 24th last season in 3-point attempts and 12th in 3-point percentage. Now, the person who made this hot take clarified that it's probably wishful thinking, and I unfortunately have to agree. I can't imagine they will make that big of a leap, but with the additions of Max Strus, George Niang, maybe even Sam Merrill playing minutes this year, that could help boost that number a bit. Most of it comes down to their pace of the offense, really their flow of the offense. Are they going to run in transition? Will there be more off-ball movement? Jackson, do you think there's a chance the Cavs lead the NBA in either of those categories?
I just wanted to say thank you, Tom, for setting this in. I wish I had the optimism that you had in all areas of life. So thank you, Tom. So 3-point attempt, that's just not going to happen just because of, as you said, the pace. There's a lot of teams that shoot them up a lot more. And if you're going to have Jared Allen and Evan Mobley, those are two guys that are basically not taking threes. So you're just going to have a hard time getting the attempt. The percentage, I can actually, you're not going to talk me into them having the top percentage, but I don't think it's as outlandish as it sounds, just because the percentage, to have a good percentage, you have to have the people shooting the shots have to be good at shooting. And the two that are going to be shooting most are Garland and Mitchell. We know how good they are. The problem last year was nobody else who shot decent volume really, had a good percentage, So you had a lot of shots from like Karis LeVert. You had a lot of shots from Kevin Love, who was very bad for most of the season.
The rare Kevin Love slander from Jackson.
Well, we're just saying
not
that
slander.
The percentage wasn't
Facts,
wasn't good. Jetty got hot and cold. So you're hoping that, now I'm going to talk myself back out of it because I was going to say, well, you have Strus, but Strus, he's going to do a lot of volume. The percentage hasn't always been like what you need to lead the league in 3-point percentage. Niang's going to help. I tried to talk myself into it. I'm sorry, Tom. I just couldn't. But they should be better. Hopefully they have more 3-point attempts. Sam Merrill would help in both. That's all I'm going to say. Yeah.
He would. He's a double threat there. I agree again. It's wishful thinking. I think the shooting has gotten better. I don't know how much that will affect where they end up in 3-point percentage or 3-point attempts, but I do think they've gotten better as a 3-point shooting team.
It's hard to get worse.
Yeah. Anytime you're playing, Evan Mobley, Jared Allen, Karis LeVert, even Isaac Okoro, players who are either bad shooters or just not great or not good shooters, it's going to be hard to really hit that number where you're like one of the top 3-point shooting teams and still be a winning team. Like if you're jacking up 3-pointers with those guys in your offense, you might not be winning many games. So I think they'll find a healthier balance this year, just looking more like a modern NBA team and like not running this like 1960s offense. But yeah, I can't imagine they finish at the top for either of those, sadly.
Yeah, one thing is that they don't have a lot of shooting depth still. Like the best teams just have shooters everywhere. The Cavs, you added Niang and Strus, and those are really the only two that I think you can safely pencil into the rotation just because of what we know about JB. So it's like that's helping, but you're still going to be running offenses with, a lot of guys who are either unwilling to shoot or just can't shoot. So, and when you have a low amount of guys who you're hoping to carry the 3-point shooting load, their percentages are going to come down because they're going to be taking a lot more contested shots. So, and that's kind of like the whole conversation about, well, Strus is going to shoot better because he's going to be taking more open shots. It's like, well, maybe. It's not like the Cavs are just still going to be running lineups where they have two guys who don't shoot the ball on the court a lot of the time. So I don't really I'll just have to wait and see before I say that that's certainly going to happen. So I pumped the brakes a little bit.
That's fair. Moving along here, I really like this next take. I think this is one of the most interesting topics we have today. So the take is, this season is the best chance Cleveland will have at making it out of the East, regardless of how much better the core gets, from Nolan. I love this one because I'm someone who, for the last 2 years, has been stressing that this core is still very young. They're still well behind their window in my eyes. I don't think they're really going to be in prime position to compete for a title for at least another year, if not 2 or 3, because a lot of this depends on the development of Evan Mobley. Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell will still be in the middle of his prime once those two really get going. So with that being said, though, you don't get to choose when your championship window opens up. You can obviously look at the 2012 Thunder as a team where they make it to the finals very early. Everyone assumes they're going to be back, and it just never happens again. The team is blown up within a few years. So right now, the Eastern Conference is about as wide open as it has been really in the last 10 years. Boston, in my eyes, has taken a subtle step back with the Marcus Smart Porzingis trade. I don't think that made them much better. A lot of people are saying it raised their ceiling and lowered their floor, which I think is a perfect way of putting it. Milwaukee is obviously still a titan in the East. They're a very difficult team to beat, but they are getting older and they're certainly vulnerable. Philadelphia, I don't know what's going on over there, but it's hard for me to imagine that they're going to be any better than they were the last few seasons, and they obviously fell very short the last 2 seasons, so they're basically off the board. And Miami is a bit of a wild card. I don't know what to expect from them. If they get Damian Lillard, that makes this even more of a conversation, but right now, the Cavs really don't have any excuse not to compete in the East and really make a run for it, so it's kind of a weird situation where I don't think they're at their best yet. I think they're probably far from it, but this could be the best opportunity they have to make it out of the East. At the very least, they need to make a deep run and get this experience while they can.
you just never really know when your window is, and a lot of times the window closes before you realize it was even open. So I do think that the Cavs have a really good chance. I mean, a good chance in relative terms, like as good of a chance as maybe they'll ever have to get out of it, just because there's a lot of problems with those teams that you mentioned. And one of the things that I would point out is that Donovan Mitchell is entering his age 27 season. Typically, especially for guards who rely a lot on their athleticism, age 27 and 28 seasons are typically their very best seasons. So I think it's pretty safe to say that this is going to be the best Donovan Mitchell. Like the Cavs are going to have the best Donovan Mitchell that there will be, and that's going to be the season. So, when you have that, when you have the East as bad as it is, it's hard to tell. Is the East going to just keep getting worse? Maybe. The East has been pretty wide open forever. It's been wide open if you have LeBron on your team. I guess if you don't have LeBron on your team, it hasn't been wide open. So it kind of just depends on what you think the Cavs are going to do going forward. If you think that, like, if you're someone like me who thinks that the best version of this team probably doesn't include Jared Allen, then maybe you could talk yourself into saying, well, this isn't going to be the best team because the team doesn't really fit around the three best players as well as it could. If you're someone who really believes in Jared Allen, maybe you can talk yourself into this being their best chance. If you're so we'll just wait and see. But like the East is so open. The Heat, the Heat earned it. The Heat beat all the best teams. So I don't want to take anything away from them, but the gap between the Heat and the Cavs isn't that wide. As long as the Cavs, that's assuming the Cavs get out of their own way, which, in the playoffs, they showed that they couldn't do that. So,
better or worse, we're going to learn a lot about the Cavs this season. With the additions of Max Strus and George Niang, it's yet to be seen how much of a difference that'll make. But realistically, this team has everything they need to be competitive to make it deep into the Eastern Conference. I don't think anyone can make an excuse at the end of the season, so hold me to that. If the Cavs get embarrassed and I try to be the optimist again, I don't think they have any excuse not to get out of the first round. Unless there's like a wave of injuries, this team should not lose in the first round, which I know that's not exactly setting the bar very high for a team this talented to say they just need to get to the second round, but that's like the bare minimum bar they need to get over.
One thing I will say is that it's tough to make with the way the East looks, it's tough to make a declaration like the season's a failure unless they get to round X, just because when there's a bunch of like decent teams, but not any great teams, like you could get some really weird matchups, even if the Cavs got the 1 seed, they could, you can easily see a situation where Milwaukee's the 4 seed. Not the 4 seed, but like in the second round, you could see them in the second round. They could be like a 4 seeded team, same with Boston. So it's like, I don't think there's going to be a lot of games separating the 1st seed from the 3rd seed. So it's like the Cavs could be the 3rd seed. They could get a tough matchup with the 6th. So it's like, it's tough to kind of forecast right now just because how even a lot of these teams are, but it's like they have as good of a chance as anybody to make it, especially if they kind of show that they can do something with their offense.
Yeah, that's going to be the key. They just need to show us something this year to really give some sort of encouragement that this is headed the right direction.
Well, they need to show it to Donovan Mitchell. They don't need to show it to us because, we believe it's the Donovan Mitchell that the Cavs need to convince to, stick around long term.
Agreed. So moving along, we have a take here from John that Emoni Bates will be pushing to start by the All-Star break. Jackson, I'll let you start off with this one.
John, we expect better here. I know you believe this, but like, John, do you believe this, or do you think that this should happen? Because I think that's an entirely separate conversation.
There's a key distinction.
Right. Like, he will not be starting by All-Star break. So I think we can safely say that, just because the Cavs needed anybody on the wing who could shoot. And they had Cedi Osman, who was like their tallest, 3-point shooter, especially with Kevin Love being bought out. And they desperately needed him. And it wasn't that Cedi Osman wasn't pushing to start. It's like Cedi Osman wasn't pushing minutes. So, and that's just all comes down to, JB not trusting him on the defensive end. So if JB's not trusting Cedi Osman on the defensive end, I don't think he's going to be trusting like a 20-year-old Emoni Bates.
19, I think.
Well, will he be 19 during the season, or will he be 20 during the season?
Oh, yeah, I'm not sure.
Right. Either way.
Big difference.
Either way, it's like, knowing what JB prioritizes, it's going to be tough for me to see him, like, it's impossible for him to actually be pushing to start. Whether he should be starting, I think this is almost as ridiculous, but I can kind of, if I squint really hard, I can maybe see something like, okay, maybe
everyone is injured.
The bench. Right. I'll just say there's a big gap between Summer League basketball and G League basketball. So I think while he has the talent, I think there's a lot of things that he doesn't do well that he's going to need to do well to be a starting caliber player, if he ever becomes a starting caliber player. I think it's going to be a longer road than people like. I think there's going to be a lot of people who look at Charge box scores, and the days he scores 32 points on 15 shots, people will say Emoni Bates should be starting. And the days that he scores 4 points on like 14 shots, no one's going to say anything. If he gets real minutes in a situation that isn't like everyone's injured during the season, I'd be pleasantly surprised.
I'd have to agree with that. I'm all team positivity when it comes to the Cavs, really just the NBA in general. I want to see the players win. I want to see the underdog stories. I want to see everyone reach their potential, but I do have to pump the brakes here, John. I'm sorry. I've been as encouraged as I can reasonably be about Emoni's performances in the Summer League, the way, even the offseason highlight videos, just the way he's carried himself. It seems like a guy who is committed to trying to get back on track to that top prospect he once was and trying to find a way to fit in the NBA. And I think there's something glimmering under the surface. I don't think there's any doubt that he can shoot the ball. But I just can't imagine a 19-year-old or 20-year-old when the season starts with so much room for improvement. I don't see that guy managing to start for a team that I also expect to win 50 or 60 games. Like, that's just not something you see with any prospect, let alone the 49th pick in the draft. So I have reasonable measured expectations for Emoni. I hope he kills it in the G League. I think it's going to be a roller coaster. I think there's going to be ups and downs, and those are the things that the Cavs can't really afford right now with their current expectations. They can't have a guy trying to figure it out at the NBA level while they're also trying to be one of the top teams in the East.
Yeah, and it's just the things that he needs to figure out aren't really issues that you can live with if you're an NBA team that has Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, and Evan Mobley on the court at the same time. So I think some of his issues are going to be like ball stopping, not moving off ball, not being in the right spots, especially on the defensive end. So it's like those just aren't issues that you can just like live with. And I know that the regular season is like not pointless, but like not as high pressure as like the playoffs and stuff like that. But you still can't live with somebody like that, especially when you got somebody like Strus who theoretically fits perfectly.
Yeah, well, let's talk about someone else who theoretically fits perfectly.
But they don't.
Our next take from Steve Quadgers says that Dean Wade is the most important role player. Jackson, I'm just going to let you slam the door shut on this one. Go ahead,
Okay,
man.
so I wish I kind of knew what Steve was talking about when he said most important. If he meant that, like, he thinks Dean is going to be the best role player, if he thinks he's going to be the most impactful role player, I'm going to say no. If he's saying he's going to be the most important in the sense that, like, you can plug him in at the 4 and just know that, hey, you're constantly getting good minutes. And if you got good minutes from Dean Wade, everything else is going to fall into place. Then I could kind of like nod my head and say, okay, sure. Yeah. But if we're going to talk about like what to expect from Dean Wade, I just don't think that we could have saw that last season and really hoped for anything with Dean Wade more than like him being serviceable if somebody goes down in the regular season. Like, I think if you're counting on Dean Wade, he's just gonna let you down because you think that he should be a better 3-point shooter and shoot at a higher volume than he does, and he just simply doesn't shoot it that much. He has a really low usage rate. Like, he just doesn't take up a lot of possessions on the court, and that's like okay for the 9th or 10th guy, 11th guy in a rotation, but he's just not somebody that you want to have out there in like a playoff setting when you need everyone to be a factor, especially when you already have guys like Isaac Okoro who can disappear on offense. You know, 2 of your best players are non-shooters. So it's like, you know, I just really can't see it unless Dean Wade kind of becomes the guy that he was for like that 2-week stretch in the 2021 season when Lauri Markkanen was out, and it was like, oh, we don't need Lauri Markkanen, we have Lauri Markkanen at home, and you know, that was like a blimp. And I think we can just, you know, if Dean Wade gives us something, we can be pleasantly surprised, but I wouldn't count on it.
Yeah, I wouldn't count on it either. It's hard not to kind of talk yourself into a 6'9" forward who does have 3-point range, even though, I mean, it hasn't really translated. Like, he can shoot the ball. I think that's fair to say, but the confidence isn't there. I don't even know if that's the issue, but it seems like there's no confidence there. He doesn't move without the ball very well on the 3-point line. I don't think he's like a motion shooter, really. Like, very different players, but for example, Sam Merrill is someone who you can have him run off screens and shoot threes. I don't think Dean Wade has really shown that he'll do that. And some of it just comes down to, again, the confidence. Like, he doesn't play like a gunner. He doesn't play like he's out there to shoot the ball. And you really don't want him out there if he isn't shooting. You don't want him out there if he's going to disappear on offense. He's a solid defender. He's genuinely one of the better wing defenders on the team just from his size alone. I think as a backup small ball 4, he could be very useful for this team, but he needs to play with a purpose. He needs to pose a threat to the other team. Otherwise, you know, why are you really putting him out there when you have other players who could eat those minutes instead? So I would love to see Dean Wade return to that little 2-week stretch that he had. It's really becoming less likely each day.
One of the good things with Dean Wade is it's kind of the other side of the coin, is that like if your starting small forward goes down, and it's like if like Strus goes down and you said we like our bench rotation, we want to keep our rotation as is, you can throw Dean Wade into the starting lineup because you know what you're going to get from Dean Wade. You know he's going to compete on the defensive end. You know he's not going to force things offensively. So you can just keep everything rolling and just plug him in. But if you're like, well, we want to try to find our 8 best players or lineups that really maximize everybody, I just don't see Dean Wade really in those lineups. And I think part of the reason why, if you look at some of the lineup data from the last 2 years, why he fit better with everyone, with the starters or with certain groups of people was because he could guard multiple positions, and because he did pose a little bit of a threat as a shooter where like you couldn't just, in the regular season at least, you couldn't just completely, abandon him. The Cavs now have better players. So I just don't see them ever like really going back to Wade unless there's injuries.
Yeah. I mean, last season, if Dean Wade was going to kind of fill that role at any point, it would have been last season. It was so wide open. The same goes for Jetty, really, as much as I love him. And I think he could be a very useful player for the Spurs. He is a useful player. He's not a bad player.
He is a useful player.
But if he was ever going to fill that role and kind of be the guy that everyone wanted him to be in Cleveland, I think it would have been last year. Granted, there were things working against him. That's kind of off topic just in terms of how much the coaching staff trusted him and how many opportunities he got. But overall, that small forward position was so wide open. That's why bringing in Max Strus to me was such a huge deal. Even if it's not perfect, they had to do something. They had to try and bring someone in that could fill that role, because if we were entering the season again trying to say hey, Dean Wade, he's going to put it together this year, he's going to be the starter, because that's what I was saying last year. I really believed it. Yeah. I genuinely believed Dean Wade was going to be the starter this time last year, and that just went downhill very quickly after the Knicks game, when that was the one shining moment of his season.
So one thing I will say is that when you're talking about good teams or teams that are trying to be at the top level, what they have is they have role players that really fit and know their role. There's a lot of the middle ground, and especially the 7th through 10th guys in rotations are all, from a skill standpoint, they're kind of interchangeable, where at a certain point it's more about your fit with the team as opposed to, really how good you are. And I think that's something to keep in mind when we talk about Isaac Okoro, who is better than Dean Wade, but also could be somebody who we're going to be talking about his spot in the rotation throughout the season. Mm-hmm. And it's just it's more important for these guys to fit or provide skills that the rest of the team really needs than it is for them to be quote unquote the best basketball player or a better player. Because if we're talking about I think Dean Wade is technically a better, more useful player in a lot of contexts than somebody like Sam Merrill or, somebody else that you want to throw out there. But it's for what the Cavs need, they just need people who can shoot and are covered offensively because they have Jared Allen and Evan Mobley. And if you were on a team where you only had one of Evan Mobley or Jared Allen, Dean Wade becomes a lot more useful because he's somebody who could rebound. He's somebody who could guard multiple positions. He's not going to be a turnstile out there. But it's if you have Jared Allen and Evan Mobley, you can afford to have a turnstile on the perimeter who can shoot, because that's what they need if you're going to have two bigs. So I think the criticism of Wade comes down to, I don't think the team needs what he provides, at least not like they did 2 years ago when they were just looking for competent guys who can soak up minutes and guard people that are over 6'6".
Yeah. And to that point with if this was a team with just one of Mobley or just Allen, I think that's why you would hope that Dean Wade's best minutes will come as that backup 4 playing alongside one of them. But the Cavs just got George Niang to play that role basically. So I'm sure he'll get opportunities to kind of, try and take that spot, but it's a long shot at this point.
And it's would you rather, we're talking in the regular season, would you rather be giving those minutes to Isaiah Mobley to see if he could ever become something? Or are you just going to bank on we know what Dean Wade is. Dean Wade is Dean Wade. He's not going to become something that he's not, and we know he's very serviceable, but he's also not going to be a difference maker.
Yeah. I think if the Cavs are going to experiment at any point in the season, it should be with guys like Isaiah Mobley, Sam Merrill, even Emoni Bates. Give them some of those minutes. I'm not saying just completely ice Dean Wade out and never give him run again, but I do think you got to get the other guys involved. Same mentality with bringing Max Strus in. It's like we saw what these guys could do last year. Let's bring in something new and just you got to experiment more this regular season. I think Cavs are going to be a very good team regardless. When you have those opportunities to run out new players and see what you have to take it.
And I would like to see them experiment with different types of lineups. Like one of the things that we've always seen in a regular season is they're always like, they never really want to go like super small. They never want to push the envelope with like truly like 4 out small ball. We're just going to run around Evan or, Allen. And I'd personally like if Niang's injured or something like that, I'd rather see them try to like, okay, well, let's try to just do a super small lineup. This is 2023, 2024. We trust Jared Allen in a second unit context. Let's just try to see if we can get as many shooters out there as possible and see what happens for like a 3-minute stretch, as opposed to like, well, we need a 4, because we can't have Karis LeVert technically covering a 4, and it's like, I'd rather just like, hey, let's, let them play.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. I have a hot take here to finish this off, Jackson. I think the Cavs are going to be a very good team next year. I think they're going to win more games than they won last year. We'll see how much of it translates to the playoffs, but I think they're going to be very good. I think they got better.
I would hope they got better. You just hope the injury luck, they get to have Donovan Mitchell, Evan Mobley, Darius Garland for a lot of the season like they had this year, this past year, which really helps things out. So I do like your hot take. My hot take, I guess, would be that, well, obviously Sam Merrill needs minutes.
Of course.
The Cavs would be better off. I think the best version of this team includes only one guy who can't shoot on the floor.
I think I see where you're going with this.
But I also think that this team, as currently built, I would be pretty disappointed I'd be disappointed if they weren't a top 3 team. And I wouldn't be like in the regular season. And I wouldn't be surprised if you said, oh, the Cavs are going to finish first in the East. I'd say, yeah, that makes sense. Just because I think they're a team with 2 good defensive bigs is just really hard to game plan for on a night-to-night basis. So I think they're going to win a lot of regular season games. But obviously, as we know, just winning regular season games doesn't make everyone happy.
Yep. So we'll save the Jared Allen hot take there for part 2, probably, because that will add another hour to this episode if we do that now. But I think this was a really good one. We got through all of your hot takes. I want to say, if you made it this far, thanks for watching or listening to the pod. Again, please go subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify at the Junkyard Pod. If you want more YouTube content, you can find me at Tony Pesta. Jackson is available on Twitter or X at Akron_Jackson, and we'll be covering the Cavs for Write Down Euclid this season. So please follow both of us and stick around as more content will be coming soon.
And send some more hot takes, but make them hotter. But
get a little spicier.
Yeah. Well, the Dean Wade one was pretty spicy.
Yeah, that came out of
Emoni Bates one was too spicy though. That was like we gotta send that back to the kitchen. That's too much. We can't handle that.
Hit us with some good hot takes, man. We need some more unhinged things to talk about here.
Yeah, someone needs to say Donovan Mitchell is the best player in the league, and then have me agree and defend it. I'm just waiting for someone to say that.
Thanks for watching or listening, everybody, and go Cavs.
I agree. Go Cavs.